All right, show of hands, who had Will Jeffress as the MVP last night? Not after the game, but going into it. When we talked about the game yesterday to get ready for Pitt Wake Forest, who said, I think Will Jeffress is going to be the difference maker tonight? I didn't. I made some predictions about the game. I made a good prediction about the game, actually. A very good prediction. But I didn't predict that. But that's exactly what happened, is Will Jeffress provided a bunch of energy in the second half. The final 8 minutes of the half, Pitt overcame an 11-point deficit in the second half. And this time, unlike the Miami game, they finished the deal, closed out the comeback, and beat Wake Forest last night at the Petersen Events Center. We got a lot to talk about from that game, so let's jump into it here on the Thursday edition of the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Thursday. It's the Morning Pitt. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Glad to be hanging out with you this morning, or this afternoon, this evening, whenever you might be watching this video. I like to think that everybody watches it right at 5 a.m. when we publish, and yes, in case you weren't sure of when these videos post every day on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, it's 5 a.m. sharp these things go online. Now, I say that, and we'll have some delay with this one, and it won't go online until 7:30, and all of you who wake up early to watch the Morning Pitt will say to me, come on, man, you delayed the release, but they're all scheduled to go at 5 a.m. So whatever time of the day you watch this video, you get a little Pitt Sports talk with us here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you won't miss out on any of our Pitt video content, like these daily Morning Pitt videos that we release every Monday through Friday, our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Of course, we didn't do it last night because of the Pitt basketball game. So we'll be live tonight. Jim Hammond and I will be hanging out with you talking Pitt sports on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That starts at 8 o'clock tonight, the live Panther-Lair show. Always look forward to those. They're a lot of fun. We do post-game shows after road basketball games. Those are a lot of fun as well, win or lose. And certainly, you know, the post-game shows after the Duke game and the Georgia Tech game had a different vibe than the post-game show after the Miami game. I suspect if we did a post-game show after last night's game, it would be a different vibe altogether, because last night we finally saw Pitt close out a comeback. They fell behind against Wake Forest, and they were able to not just come back, but they came all the way back, as opposed to the Miami game where they didn't quite make it all the way back. We'll talk about it in a second. Look, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm so excited to talk about this game from last night. Getting ahead of myself here. But look, that's the YouTube channel where you can like and subscribe. And then, of course, our website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, is the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com is the website you need to check out and be a part of. Okay. Pitt 77, Wake Forest 72, and let me give you a little something that I read on the internet yesterday. Is a preview for last night's game. All right, I read this from an analyst, college basketball analyst. Somebody who keeps an eye on the ACC, that kind of thing, and they were talking about this game, little preview blurb, and they said, I'm betting on the carryover here. Pitt finished the Miami game on a 27-12 run, and I think the Panthers will find a way to continue that success against Wake Forest tonight. A big key to the run in Coral Gables was the play of the guards, specifically that all three guards played together. With Jalen Lowe, Bub Carrington, and Ishmael Leggett on the court at the same time on Saturday, Pitt outscored Miami a total of 38-27, including almost all of that stretch to end the game. The same thing happened in the Georgia Tech game, and I think Jeff Capel is going to continue leaning into it tonight. I think Lowe, Carrington, and Leggett lead the way with another high teens or 20s performance from Blake Hinson to get the win. Prediction, Pitt 76, Wake Forest 71. And again, I remind you, the final score was Pitt 77, Wake Forest 72. Yes, that was my prediction blurb. Yes, I am tooting my own horn. I'm patting myself on the back because, look, I don't get many of these things right. I have the worst record. All of us on the Panther-Lair.com staff make picks, and I have the worst record out of any of us. So I finally got one right and actually made up a little bit of ground on Jim and Matt and Houston. They all picked Wake Forest. Steven Gertz and I both picked Pitt, so I made up a little bit of ground there. I am 13-8, just like Pitt is 13-8. My record has matched theirs. There was probably some times when I picked them to win and they didn't, and there was at least one time I picked them to lose and they didn't. But I digress. That was my prediction, and I feel pretty smart about picking a 76-71 final score in a game that ended up being 77-72. That's pretty good. Not nearly as good, though, as what Will Jeffress did last night. And it's amazing that in a game where one player scored 24 points, one Pitt player scored 24, another Pitt player scored 22, and another one scored 17, a game where they scored 50 points in the second half, a game where they came back from being down double digits at halftime and double digits a couple minutes into the second half, and pulled off an upset, or not an upset, I shouldn't say, but pulled off a comeback win. A game where they won their first ACC home game of the season. Jeff Capel's 250th career win number 299 in the Petersen Events Center. All these storylines, and the thing that we want to talk about the most, the thing that I want to talk about the most, the thing that you're probably thinking about the most, and if you're not, you should be, is a guy who scored 2 points, was 1 of 1 from the floor, and had 2 rebounds. And that was he had a turnover, a foul, and a steal. And that was the extent of his contributions in 12 minutes. But damned if Will Jeffress wasn't the man last night. And he wasn't the man for the entirety of his 12 minutes that he played. He was the man for the 8 minutes and 13 seconds he played to finish the game. Now, Sorry, I forgot to get my trusty notebook out here for reference. When Will Jeffress came into the game with 8 minutes and 13 seconds remaining, Pitt had just tied the game. No, he came into the game, with 9:46 remaining. So it was actually close to 10 minutes of play. And when he came in, Pitt was trailing 51-50. Now, the Panthers had closed out he came in at 9:46. But what happened and what was most relevant is at the 8:13 mark, Blake Hinson came into the game and replaced Federico. That's why I was looking at my notes. I'm like, wait, this doesn't line up. No. Will Jeffress played the final 9:46 of the half. But at the 8:13 mark was the most significant change in Pitt's approach to the game. And it was ultimately what I think won them the game. Blake Hinson came back in. So your lineup on the court was Jalen Lowe, Bub Carrington, Ishmael Leggett, Blake Hinson, and Will Jeffress. Not the biggest lineup that Pitt could possibly put on the court. And one that, I initially, when they brought in Hinson, I said, this is the 5 they're going with, eh? And, of course, the first question I had, and probably the question you had when you were watching the game was, so who's going to guard Efton Reed? Because Efton Reed, at that point, was pretty much having his way with Federico. He had 14 points. I think he had about 7 rebounds at that point in the game. And it really looked like Reed could just get whatever he wanted against Federico or Guillermo Diaz-Graham if they decided to go back to Diaz-Graham. He only ended up playing like 2 minutes in this game anyway. But it was clear that Efton Reed, the big center from Wake Forest, who transferred from LSU, went to LSU out of high school, transferred to Gonzaga, ended up at Wake Forest. It was clear that he had a real advantage on Federico. And I'm surprised that they didn't go to this all game long because I believe that Reed could have probably finished with 20 and 20 and fouled Federico and Guillermo Diaz-Graham out of the game. Unless Jeff Capel made the adjustment that he ultimately made at the 8:13 mark when he brought Blake Hinson back in and slid Will Jeffress to the 5. And this ended up being the difference in the game. Efton Reed had made 2 baskets in the previous 2 minutes of the game. Really was keeping Wake Forest in it. Their offense cooled off considerably in the second half and allowed Pitt to come back into the game, in addition to Pitt making just about everything. But Reed was pretty dominant. For as well as some of these other guys played, Efton Reed had an opportunity to be dominant in this game. But at the 8:13 mark, with Will Jeffress guarding him, things changed. The whole, I think, tone of the game changed. And the tone had changed earlier in the second half. I'll talk about the point where I think it really changed. But the final 8:13 with Jeffress on Reed, it changed the whole complexion of the game. Because now, instead of Reed trying to back down Federico, who's thin and not very strong and not overly aggressive, now Reed had to deal with Will Jeffress, who gave up a lot in terms of size, in terms of height, but he's got a little build to him, he's got a little strength to him, and he's really good at being incredibly pesky. He's Will Jeffress the pest. is what he was. And from the very start, from the time Will Jeffress was defending Efton Reed, from the time he started guarding Reed, he was physical with Reed. I tweeted it shortly after that. Probably there was a media timeout at 7:56. I might have tweeted it right then because it was clear from that point where I said, Will Jeffress has been guarding Efton Reed, and it seems that the game plan is get rough with him. Rough him up a little bit. And that's what Will Jeffress did. And for the final 8:13 of the game, a game where, Wake Forest was barely holding on to a lead, the game was tied, they were trying to stay in it. Efton Reed, one of their better players who had one of the best games of the night, didn't even attempt a field goal. He had, I think, 3 rebounds in that 8 minutes and 13 seconds, and I think almost all of them were offensive rebounds on one possession. He had a turnover and 2 fouls. And that's what he did. And he played that whole stretch. Jefferson Reed played that whole stretch against each other. And Efton Reed did not even attempt a shot. After the game, he was almost cocky about it. He was asked about how things changed when he had to guard, or when Will Jeffress was on him and it seemed to be getting physical. And he said, I know Will, I've known Will for a long time. It's all love. We're basketball players. And, I pushed him, he pushed me, this and that. But he said something like, he's pretty strong, but I handled it accordingly. You handled it? What did you handle, sir? You didn't even attempt a shot. If I recall, he only touched the ball once outside of those. Like I say, he grabbed 3 rebounds on like 1 or 2 possessions in the final minute. But prior to that, over the course of the previous 8 minutes, he touched the ball once that I can recall. Will Jeffress was denying the ball getting into Efton Reed. And if I'm not mistaken, the one time I'm thinking of that he actually touched the ball, the pass went in, Reed tried to back down, and he realized there was a wall of Jeffress behind him. Not Will Jeffress, wall Jeffress behind him. He took one step and passed it back out. Will Jeffress shut down Efton Reed in this game, and it changed the game. I think his teammates fed off the energy. Obviously, they fed off the energy of having engineered the comeback because at that point it was tied at 55. When Jeffress started guarding Reed, it was tied at 55. And so I think they had energy from hitting shots and coming back. But I think they fed off the energy he was showing in how he played. And when he had the dunk off the inbounds play, which was outstanding, and ended up putting Pitt up 7 points with 2:55 to go. I mean, the place went crazy. And he went crazy, and his teammates went crazy. It was a great atmosphere and great energy. And it was driven by a guy who hasn't played. I meant to bring up Will Jeffress's recent stats here. Let me bring up his game log of what Will Jeffress has been doing lately. He played 1 minute at Miami, 2 minutes at Georgia Tech, 4 minutes at Duke. He played 20 minutes in the loss against Syracuse, 11 minutes in the loss against Duke, the home loss against Duke, 7 minutes at Louisville, 4 against UNC. But even if you just go over the last 3 games, the 3-game road trip, he played a total of 7 minutes. I mean, this is a guy who has not been doing much lately, and he's been sitting on the bench. But when he was called upon, he went in and gave everything he had. And when he was called to do something rather extraordinary, which is guarding a guy like Efton Reed, I mean, he shut him down. It was really remarkable to see, and I think it had as much to do with this win as anything else that happened. As Bub Carrington scoring a career-high 24 points, as Ishmael Leggett putting up 22, Blake Hinson having like a quiet 17, and this team just generally playing really, really well in the second half. They scored 50 points. We have a group text with the various writers on Panther-Lair.com, and when it was 37-27 at halftime, I sort of joked of like, how could I have picked this team to score 70 in this game? And, to his credit, Matt Steinbrink said, hey, there's a lot of game left. I never saw them score. I never imagined that they would score 50 in the second half, but that's exactly what they did. And big credit to Will Jeffress for the energy. I'll tell you another energy point. This happened here. I want to bring up the official play-by-play to make sure I get it exactly right. But it was right around less than 16 minutes, less than the 16-minute mark. So about like 4 minutes or so into the second half. And Wake Forest missed a three-pointer. Pitt had cut the score to 6. Wake Forest missed a three-pointer. Federico got the rebound. Jalen Lowe tries a 3 at the other end, misses it, but gets the rebound, passes it to Bub Carrington. He shoots, misses it. Federico gets the rebound, passes to Blake Hinson. Hinson passes to Ishmael Leggett, who drives and gets a basket to cut the lead to 4. And I think this was such a huge moment here. Wake Forest ended up calling a timeout, and I think they called a timeout not necessarily because Steve Forbes needed to regroup or something like that. I mean, I'm sure coaches always have that. And it had been a long time since Wake Forest had scored. They hadn't scored since the 18:31 mark, and now it was under 15 minutes or 15 and a half minutes. So it was about 3-minute scoring drought for Wake Forest. But I think Steve Forbes sensed that the momentum was favoring Pitt at that point. Pitt didn't have any offensive rebounds in the first half. They had 4 in the first 4.5 minutes of the second half, including that stretch right there. And when Pitt got the back-to-back offensive rebounds off the long rebounds off the missed three-pointers by Lowe and Carrington, Jalen Lowe's offensive rebound, the energy built in the building with the team. He passes to Bub Carrington. Carrington misses the 3. Federico gets the rebound. The energy builds up even higher. He passes to Blake Hinson. I think everybody wanted Hinson to shoot. Hinson ends up passing to Leggett, who drives in for the layup. And when the basket finally went down after 2 offensive rebounds, energy, building in the Petersen Events Center, the team is getting fired up. It looks like a comeback is possible after being down 10 at halftime and 11 a minute and a half into the second half. I feel like that really keyed the energy that Pitt carried into the rest of the rest of the half and ultimately through the comeback effort. This was a game, and I hate saying things like this because I don't often think they're true. I don't think there's a lot that goes, I think there's a lot more that goes into it, but it's really felt in the second half like Pitt wanted it more. And all I mean by that is that Pitt had more energy. Pitt was working harder. And Wake Forest didn't seem like it was willing to do the things that Pitt was willing to do. Jeff Capel called it competitive urgency. He said there was more competitive urgency in the second half. And I thought that was a really interesting way to say it. Capel said, quote, "We talked at halftime and I told them you've played hard, but it requires harder. We've been physical, but we have to be more physical. This is what the game requires," end quote. And I think that's really interesting because I think that's what we saw. I didn't think they played awful in the first half. They didn't defend all that great, although Wake Forest shooting 3 of 3 on their, making their first 3-point attempts sort of colored my perception, at least, of the entire first half. They didn't play terrible, but obviously they only scored 27 and they were down 10 at halftime, so they didn't play very good. But I felt like they came out and they had more energy. They did turn it up a level, and I think after those offensive rebounds, there was no stopping them. I think you could really feel the momentum shift, and it's a credit to this team that they were able to stay in it when they were down 10, just like they stayed in it against Miami and they stayed in it against Georgia Tech. They've had multiple games here in the last couple of weeks where they've been down in the second half, even by double digits, and they've been able to maintain and keep fighting and keep battling. And we all dismiss that Miami game. It's a moral victory that they were able to come back as much as they were. And that's not worth anything. It doesn't matter that you got close. It doesn't, that doesn't count. But the reality is, every time they battle back like that, I think they're learning more and more about what it takes to win. They had to battle back against Georgia Tech. They had to battle back against Miami. One game had a bigger deficit that they had to overcome, and they fell short of fully overcoming it. But I think they kept learning more and more about what they need to do in the second half, what kind of energy they need to have, what kind of urgency they need to have. And I think it came through again tonight. And that is a credit to the team. I think we can give them credit. And I think this win was driven in part by the loss at Miami. I think some of the lessons they took from that loss at Miami help them pull this off tonight and win this game tonight? Well, that and Will Jeffress help them win this game tonight. Good win for Pitt. To get to 13-8 overall. I think they're 4-6 in the ACC now, halfway point of the conference schedule. Am I right about that? Did I? Let me make sure I didn't mess that number up. 4-6 in the ACC. So halfway through the conference schedule, 13-8. They got Notre Dame at home on Saturday for an opportunity to win game number. An opportunity to earn their 300th win in the Petersen Events Center. So a good win for Pitt last night, no question about it. Wake Forest, not that much better record-wise, 13-7 overall, 5-4 in the ACC. But if you're Pitt, any opportunity you get, any time you can take care of business and finish a game like they did, that's huge. So kudos to Pitt, kudos to Will Jeffress, for sure. I gave him my game MVP. I can't imagine you would disagree, but maybe you do. He wasn't the only one who played well. Bub Carrington played great. Ishmael Leggett has been really good lately. I think Blake Hinson, like I say, he had a quiet 17, which shout out to Blake for a quiet 17. It was a good game for Pitt, and good to get that first ACC home win. All right, tomorrow we got the Morning Pitt mailbag, so make sure you tune in for that. That's always a lot of fun. There's still time. If you want to submit a question, go to the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, the Between Fifth and Forbes message board. And that way you can submit a question for tomorrow's mailbag. We'll answer as many as we can tomorrow. That'll be a lot of fun. So thanks for tuning in today. We appreciate it. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Enjoy your Thursday, and we will talk to you tomorrow morning for the Morning Pitt mailbag right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.